This question comes from Joanna, who asks, what would happen if all the bodies of water on Earth magically disappeared? As is often the case with these questions, everyone would die. The first people to notice would be swimmers and boaters, for obvious reasons. To avoid a glass-half-empty scenario, we're going to assume all the water is replaced by air, and we'll assume that by all bodies of water disappear, Joanna's including underground bodies like aquifers, water frozen in ice caps, and artificial bodies of water like swimming pools and water tanks. Most people swim in water which is relatively shallow, so most of them would survive the fall to the bottom, albeit with a few broken bones. Within the first second, a large fraction of the boats in lakes, rivers, and shallow harbors would also crash to the bottom, and many of those on board would survive. Boats out in the ocean would take longer to fall. Over the next 5 seconds, a wave of crashes would spread outward from the continents as boats struck the continental shelf farther and farther from shore. These falls would leave no survivors. After the first 6 or 7 seconds, there would be a brief lull in the ship destruction rate. Continental shelves drop off steeply, and most of the ships out over the deep sea would take longer to fall. The Titanic sank in about 2 miles of water, with the two halves of the ship taking between 5 and 15 minutes to reach the bottom. Without the ocean there, it would have reached the bottom in about 30 seconds, striking at airliner cruising speed. Within the first minute, just about every large ship would be on the bottom. The final boat would probably be a small sailboat or life raft that happened to be crossing a deep ocean trench when the water vanished. If there were a seaplane floating out on the deep ocean, it could conceivably survive, although it would take some luck and quick thinking by the pilot. The plane would initially drop, but as it gained speed, it would tend to pull out into a glide, and the pilot would have a bit of time to try to start the engine or land on the seafloor like a glider. Fish, whales, dolphins, and nearly all marine life would also die out in the first few minutes. Even if they survive the fall, anything that breathes oxygen dissolved in water, like fish, would quickly suffocate on the now dry ocean floor. And air-breathing animals would likely suffer the same slow suffocation and dehydration that regularly kills beached whales. But then the really weird stuff starts. Without pools of water to drink from, people and most animals would dehydrate and die in a matter of days. Without evaporation from lakes and oceans feeding the water cycle, it would stop raining. And within a few weeks, plants would start withering in the ever drier air. Within months, mass forest die-offs would begin. Huge amounts of dry, dead vegetation lead inevitably to fire, and within a few years, most of the world's forests would burn. Forests store huge amounts of carbon dioxide, and this burning would roughly double the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, accelerating global warming. All in all, Joanna's scenario would result in virtually all life dying out pretty fast. But then things get even worse. Without a water cycle to weather rocks, the carbon silicate feedback system which acts to stabilize Earth's climate would shut down. Without this feedback, volcanic CO2 would build up in our atmosphere, eventually leading to scorching temperatures similar to Venus. We are eventually going to lose our oceans anyway. As the sun gets older and hotter, water will eventually start escaping through evaporation, and the planet will dry out and heat up. However, the loss of the oceans doesn't seem like something worth worrying much about, since the oceans are going to be here long after our species is gone. Unless Joanna ruins everything.